Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Let's get a little bit of business out of the way. Yes, my hair is adorable. Okay? Now, to the 95% of you who ask me whether it's mine, I say possession is 9/10 of the law. And that's that. So our title this morning is The 7 Steps to Healing. It's very important that we understand, as metaphysicians, that there is never really anything to heal, is there? Dr. Holmes, our founder, makes it very clear that there's nothing to heal. If there's one thing to heal, it's simply at the level of our thought. We're not about fixing conditions or making anything better. It's about shifting our thinking so that the conditions of our lives respond in truth. But we need to use the word heal to have a way of communicating, especially this morning because that is our title. Things have a natural tendency toward perfection. We originate out of the perfection of spirit, and in every moment we're living in that. And sometimes as we grow to adulthood, we soak up the messages of race consciousness that say no, or that's too much, or that's not enough, or it takes a long time to heal, or you can't do that, those kinds of things. And whether we do it consciously or not, they sink in and we start to believe them. But as children, we don't do that, do we? This past winter, my little niece, Esme, who's 4.5, went sledding for the first time. They live in Atlanta now, so they have snow. And even though she was only sledding down her driveway, she crashed head-on into a tree without a helmet. And my sister posted pictures of her on Facebook that made me go weak in the knees. Her forehead was black and blue, and there was a knot on it that protruded out from her face. Okay, this is on Thursday. Friday morning, they get on a plane to come to California to visit us. They didn't get in until late Friday night, so I didn't see them until Saturday morning. But first thing Saturday morning, I'm ringing my parents' doorbell. My dad opens the door. The children are running toward me, and I am bracing myself for her face, right? And I look at her, and there's a scratch, and that's it. 48 hours later, it went from disfigurement to a scratch. And why is that? Because nobody told her she couldn't heal or heal quickly. Nobody told her that the perfection in which she was created should have limitations on it placed on her by the world. So she just did what she does, which is live her life and talk all the time and cause trouble and throw fits and be darling. And here she was with a tiny scratch. So that is how it's supposed to be, but most of us have been conditioned away from that. I call it air-conditioned, E-R-R. We have been conditioned toward erroneous thinking, okay? So what do we have to do? We have to deliberately turn away from effect and focus our thoughts on truth. We have to do that consciously and from an aware place of mind, if it doesn't happen naturally. In Practicing the Presence, Joel Goldsmith writes, true spiritual healing is not something that takes place in the body or in one's affairs. It takes place in the consciousness of the individual as the soul is opened to the light of truth and to the activity of God. So this morning, as we talk about the 7 levels of healing, we're talking about how we go about opening our soul to the light of truth and the activity of God. So our first level is acceptance. How many of you have heard that one, ad infinitum, and you're sick and tired of it? Well, this horrible thing happened to me, but it's okay. This horrible thing happened to me, but it must be God's will, so I'm going to accept it. That's not how we roll here. Our acceptance doesn't work that way, does it? No one has ever said to us, that's the way it is, get used to it. No. Science of mind, metaphysics, asks us to accept one thing and one thing only. One idea, one premise with 2 prongs, okay? A, that there is a power for good in the universe that is everywhere present, that is the only power, the only creative force. And B, that we are created in its image and after its likeness. Hence, we consciously unify with it. That's all you're ever going to need to accept here. There is God, the good, and there is us, and we are created out of it, and we are one with it. So, to those of you who are experienced in this teaching, that may sound familiar, like the recognition and unification steps of prayer treatment. Yes? We can't go anywhere without recognizing God and unifying with it. Even if we're skeptical upon first coming into this teaching, even if we came out of a religion that insisted the Creator is something outside of us, that it's separate from us, we need to wrap our heads around that. So we're talking about accepting truth. There is one God and only one God, and we are part of it. Which leads us to level 2. You're going to love this one. Of course, you have a sheet. You can see it before I tell you. Communion and obedience. Now, am I trying to conjure up images from your scary religious past? Maybe. But if so, it's only for the shock value, because when we talk about communion and obedience in metaphysics, it's not old school religion, okay? It's Dr. Holmes' spirituality, Dr. Holmes' philosophy. And the clearest explanation of our relationship to God love and God law vis-a-vis communion and obedience can be found in chapter 16 of the textbook, which is entitled The Principles of Successful Living. If you have never read chapter 16, do that immediately. If you have travel plans for this weekend, go home first and read your textbook. If you haven't read it in a long time, reread chapter 16. It's absolutely wonderful. Under the heading Spirit and Mental Law, Dr. Holmes writes, "It is impossible to divorce spiritual understanding from the proper use of mental law. The spirit within us is God, and only to the degree that we listen to and seek to obey this spirit shall we really succeed. At present," he says, "very few people differentiate between the spirit of the universe and the law of the universe. The Spirit of God, which we think of as the Creator, is a divine presence, while the law is a mechanical force." A couple paragraphs later, he goes on to write, "We must differentiate between the divine presence as universal spirit, a thing to be communed with, and the universal law, which is simply a blind force. It is the law of freedom to all who believe in and obey it." So we're talking about the metaphysical twist on communion and obedience. We commune with God and we obey the law. We commune with God love, we obey, comply with, adhere to God law. We have to understand both. In addition to accepting recognition and unification, we need to engage ourselves in a deep understanding of the two facets of the one God, love and law. Okay? How many of you are very clear in your minds about the difference between love and law? And you understand they are two sides of one divine coin, if you will. Okay. The mechanical part is that subjective power that works on our behalf all the time. It is our faithful servant. Dr. Holmes refers to it frequently as our faithful servant, the part of God that says yes to everything we want. Now, what do we want? And knowing law is our faithful servant, that it is standing by to receive instruction and the power of our conviction. What do we want? What do we want law to do for us? This brings us to level 3, which is analysis. On your sheet, I said, no couch required, because it's not about going into therapy for years and years, although that could help too. But we're not talking about that this morning. Analysis is where we look at our lives and decide what we want to change and where we want to grow. We assess the situations in our lives. Some of them will be perfectly fine just the way they are. Others would benefit from some attention and some growth energy. Yes? Okay? And we need to do this mindfully because the decisions we make us. The decisions we make us. So we evaluate our circumstances. We assess the situation. And in the process, we need to employ sound judgment, what Emma Curtis Hopkins calls right discernment. So we start looking at the conditions of our lives through our understanding, through our spiritual training, through truth with a capital T. We are endowed with this amazing faculty called conscious mind. It's also called mortal mind or carnal intellect, and it assigns meaning to everything. And there's nothing wrong with that, except the way it tends to assign meaning is in terms of good or bad, or right or wrong, often polar opposites. It's a value judgment, okay? So we have to rise above that, outside of mortal mind and carnal intellect, using immortal mind, our individual use of divine mind, our spiritual intellect, and override those world-based meanings we've assigned in order to assign a deeper meaning to everything. We have an internal dialogue around this, don't we?